Welcome back. Tonight, we're starting something special, Yearwalker, a story that reveals itself piece by piece. The first two parts will play tonight, perfect for winding down, doing chores, or just escaping into something strange. The next part will continue next Monday. Settle in and let's begin. The Yearwalker Part 1. I was born in Maryland in the autumn of '99. My biological father, Keith Digman, was never a part of the picture, so I was raised by my mother and stepfather. But after a falling out with my family in the spring of 2019, I was left to fend for myself, financially and otherwise. Striking out on my own, with little to no prospects, I decided to get back in touch with my biological father. It didn't take long for me to learn he had passed away a few years ago. To get to know him better, and because I lacked any direction in life, I decided to seek out what remained, to see who he was and what he did. Turns out my father was a man of many regrets. He'd been in and out of jail dozens of times. He was a known alcoholic, a thief, and hadn't kept a job for longer than a few weeks. He was, to all intents and purposes, an unapologetic failure. But I knew that couldn't be the full story. I looked up his closest living relative, a half-brother named John Digman, a sort of uncle, I guess. He was a pain in the ass to find. He was registered on a dozen addresses, under different names, in different states. Every lead just took me to another throwaway account, an empty lot, some unknown nobody who'd been slipped a 20 and told to shut up. This was a man who didn't want to be found. That is, until I found myself in Tomskog, Minnesota. The first time I met John Digman was at a corner pub in central Tomskog. The kind of place that'd been run by the same people for 30 years, and who'd only taken on the place as a favor for the last person who ran it for 30 years. These were solid, salt-of-the-earth kind of people, so when two strangers stepped in to order a plate of nachos and a couple of beers, they couldn't help but to wonder what was going on. But apart from that, we were alone. John was in his early 40s. He had long dark hair with streaks of silver running along his ears. He was clean-shaven, had a trucker cap that promoted fire safety, and unassuming earth-colored clothes. He was tall, thin as a stick, and kept wearing sunglasses even in the dark. This was my long-lost uncle. "So about your dad," he said, rolling a toothpick between his fingers. "You sure you want to know?" "Yeah," I nodded. "I've heard some bad stuff. You haven't heard half of it." "Then it's about time someone told me." John nodded. He snapped the toothpick in two, using one half to clean his fingernails and the other to pick his teeth. "Look," he said. "Keith was your father in a way. I didn't spend a lot of time with him these past 10 years, but I got a few emails every now and then. Can't I just ask you stuff about him?" "Sure," he shrugged. "Ask away." We got our orders. A plate of nachos, olives, some cheese, and 2 beers. John just poked around the plate, not grabbing anything, while I horked it all down like I was in a race. "So," I asked in between bites, "how did he die?" "That's probably the most complicated question you could have asked me." He told me about a conversation he'd had with my father not long before he died. The story went a little something like this. The reason for Keith Digman to come to Tomskog was a last-ditch effort. He was disease-ridden, regretful, and desperate. He had nothing to his name, and all he wanted was an honest chance to make things right. Turns out, there is a place in Tomskog that is historically unique. Some of the early settlers used to travel there, as it was the only nearby town that had something resembling a church. But it also drew other crowds, of other faiths. One group of Scandinavian settlers had a peculiar ritual that they performed there, called the Yearwalk. It was a sort of contract between the natural and the unnatural. On New Year's Eve, you could walk counterclockwise around the local church 12 times, one for each month. If you did, you would renounce your Christian faith for a year. That meant an entire year as a faithless outcast, ripe for the picking by any demon or ghoul that could find your immortal soul. However, if you made it through that entire year, your strife would be rewarded. "So what would you get?" I asked. "Gotta be something big. You get a wish." "So, whatever you want?" "Whatever you want." I could see how that would be tempting to someone like Keith. A chance to make it all right, to set things straight. Anyone desperate enough might just do it. "So what happened?" "I think he went through with it," nodded John. And then he died. I ended up finishing the entire nacho plate on my own. John sipped his beer but didn't finish it. I could tell why he was so scrawny. The guy had no appetite. We talked a lot about the way Keith used to be, his years in high school, his likes and losses, how he loved to blast Kiss classics driving his pride and joy, a 68 Froge Sprite. He'd been an open, kind, and honest man once upon a time until the world caught up with him. As the day turned to midnight, we ended up taking a walk around a nearby lake. John pointed out something interesting. "This is where the church used to be, by the way," he said, pointing at the lake. "There was a sinkhole at the turn of the century, dragging it all down to the bottom." "There's a church at the bottom of the lake?" I chuckled. "Then why is it named Frog Lake?" "Believe me, the frogs are far more interesting," grinned John. As we said our goodbyes, I got a firm handshake from him. His hands were ice cold, and I got a glimpse of his eyes under those sunglasses, bloodshot with a void black iris. "I think I get what you're planning to do," he said. "I'm not here to tell you what to do, but if you want to do this, take it seriously. Some things are out of your control." "You believe this is real?" I asked. "You think yearwalking really killed him? You'd be surprised how things really work when you get into the nitty-gritty," he shrugged. We said our goodbyes and went our separate ways. As we did, he called out to me, "If you need me, just give me a call." Strange, his number was on my phone, but I didn't remember saving it. That night, I thought about my estranged father. Keith had an idea of what kind of life he wanted to live, but something happened along the way. Maybe it was his own fault, maybe it was. Either way, it seemed cruel for things to end like they did. A lonely man wandering around a freezing lake on New Year's Eve, asking the world for a favor. I decided I would make the year walk in his place and ask whatever powers that be to show him mercy. Maybe give him a second chance, somewhere, somehow. All good intentions. I stayed in Tomskog for a while. I got a part-time job at a local warehouse and rented a small apartment on the outskirts of town. I barely had enough to make ends meet, but the place was small and the rent was cheap. The landlord, a woman in her late 40s, insisted I take the place at a discount. Nice lady, but I'm not used to people being nice. Not that nice, at least. November turned to December. By the time New Year's Eve was coming about, I had almost forgotten why I stayed in the first place. I'd got to know a few people around town and made some friends at work. Just casual banter between acquaintances, but they were good people. They'd invited me to a New Year's Eve party, and I felt like an idiot when I declined. I'd checked out the path, and walking one whole lap around Frog Lake took at least 40 minutes. I'd need most of the day to get all 12. But this was my goodbye to Keith Digman in a way, a send-off. New Year's eventually came about. People were celebrating all over town, even in the early afternoon. I could hear cheers and fireworks going up from every street downtown, but I kept walking further and further away. As the cheers died down, I was left with the crunch of snow and gravel, walking the path of Frog Lake. "All right, old man," I sighed, "I hope you get your wish." I started walking. There was a convenient road that circled the entire lake. It was lined with streetlights, half of which were broken. There were offshoots along the path leading to hiking trails and lights from a dozen houses peeking through the pine forest. A few sections of the path were lined with a white picket fence. I started around 4 p.m. and figured all 12 laps would be done by midnight. It might take me a little longer than expected, but if I finished early, I could pop by the corner pub for a drink on my way home. I could use the warmth. Minnesota winters can be brutal. The first lap went without a hitch. I was listening to a podcast and just enjoying the scenery. These old towns have that certain something that not many places have, that feeling of people having really lived there. Not just been there, but lived there. Names carved into trees, a broken bicycle thrown into the woods, a handmade sign with a Bible quote about snakes and paradise. You could tell there were a lot of memories in these trails. The second lap, I ate a sandwich. Not that exciting. Had to throw away the pickles, they'd gone black seemingly overnight. Not that appetizing. By the third lap, I stopped to stretch near a clearing in the forest. I could imagine the place to be beautiful in the summer. There was a lavender farm north of there. and you could probably smell it all the way here. By the fourth lap, I was ready to call it quits. I'd been walking for 2 hours, and I was starting to ask myself what the hell I was doing. It was then that I noticed I'd gotten a text, just minutes earlier, from John. "You sure about this?" it read. It was a hard question to answer. I didn't know if I was sure or not. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I wanted to do it. I didn't respond, but I somehow got the feeling that he already knew my answer. I got into the zone. I just kept walking as the sky turned darker and darker. Lap 4, 5, 6, they all just passed me by. After a while, the podcast was finished, and I didn't even notice. I just kept walking. The sound of fireworks grew stronger, and I met some early celebrators walking the same trail as me. Some of them waved, others just hurried off to wherever they were going. No one else was doing the year walk, it seemed. But I was feeling strange. Maybe I was just tired or dizzy, but it felt like I'd been walking for ages. My feet were doing it automatically, like I'd forgotten how to stop. It was an out-of-body experience, and I felt myself drifting off into a thoughtless wander. The night grew darker, briefly illuminated by exploding lights, little snaps lighting up the sky as if to pull me out of my trance. To wake me up, maybe that's what they're really there for. As I started the final lap, I could feel my feet growing heavy. I was cold, exhausted, and hungry, more so than usual. This was taking a heavier toll than I'd anticipated, and I'm not that out of shape. Still, I couldn't stop now. One more lap and I was done. But everything looked different in the dark. The shadows grew longer, and all the little quirks along the path seemed more threatening. It felt like a warning of things to come. The fireworks would cast long shadows, making it look like shapes moving through the trees. I'd hear cracks in the frozen lake, as if something underneath was probing for a weakness. I heard laughter in the woods. There was a foul stench coming from a house. Black footsteps leading into an open field, shards of a broken mirror scattered across the path, and at the very end of the line, a dried blue sunflower hanging from a broken streetlight. Had I just not seen any of it, or had it been there all along? What the hell kind of town was this? I took that final step, closing the circle. 12 laps, a complete year walk. I resigned my faith and surrendered to whatever powers may be for a promise of a wish fulfilled. I felt like an idiot, a superstitious idiot. I wasn't going to the corner pub. No way. I was going home to shower and sleep for 12 hours straight. I stumbled up 3 flights of stairs, no elevator, and barely made it through the door. I dropped my jacket on the floor, locked the front door, and collapsed on the toilet. It took me at least 20 minutes to build up the strength to get undressed. I had never been that tired. My body ached, and I felt at least 60 pounds heavier. I finally managed to get in the shower. One of those combined bathtub shower combos. Nothing fancy, but I'd enjoyed a few evenings there. But that night, I just wanted to get clean and collapse on my bed. The water was cold and smelled strange. I just stood there with my eyes closed, half asleep. I didn't care enough to step out of the cold. I just wanted to get it over with. I opened my eyes and looked up, only to see the water turn black. And in that moment, the lights went out. I thought I'd gotten something in my eye, but no matter how hard I rinsed, the room stayed dark. There was an awful rumbling sound coming from the pipes as the water turned into a thick sludge. It had this powerful chemical stench, like a mix of acetone and raw rubber. I stepped out of the shower, trying to find my towel in the dark. I could feel specks of dirt on my skin and a thin layer sticking to my skin as I wiped myself dry. I'd have to shower again once the lights came back on. I tried to find my phone to turn on the flashlight, but I'd left it in the hallway. I fumbled for the door handle, put my hand on it, and stopped. There was a shuffling noise in the other room. I stopped. Despite being so tired I could barely move my legs, I felt ready to run. Like something primal in me put a cold hand around my spine, urging me to pay attention. There was something in the other room, and it was a threat. "Little wheat," a voice came through the door. "Have you come for the harvest?" The voice pierced the door and curled into my ear, making me twinge with unease. If I could get the door open, I'd be able to reach my phone and call for help. But something in me wanted to just hold my breath and disappear. Have you grown tired of dance and drink, little wheat? Have you grown tall and nurturing? Please just leave. I don't want to call the police. Leave, it laughed. The shuffling noise grew louder as something shot through the room. In the blink of an eye, I felt the door buckle as something heavy pressed against it. You asked me to come, little wheat. Why would I leave? I didn't even notice I was doing it. I was backing into the corner, holding up my hands, repeating no, no, no to myself like a mantra. It was as if something inside of me had snapped and taken control, and I was just listening from the sidelines. Whatever was on the other side of that door was here to do something awful to me. Little wheat, your purpose is clear. Whether you feed my children now or later is irrelevant. Your perception is flawed. I didn't know what to say. I had to do something. I scrambled into the bathtub and turned the shower back on, hoping it couldn't hear me over the rushing water. Sadly, all I got was that thick sludge, foul-smelling, viscous chunks dripping on my cold shoulder. I am coming in. The door buckled and shattered into pieces. I screamed. Like a balloon, I let all the air out of my lungs and just screamed. Something huge slithered across the floor, barely squeezing into the bathroom, struggling against the doorframe. The voice came from the ceiling as the head struggled to fit. The shower curtains were torn down, and something cold and scaly slithered up my leg. There you are. An impossibly muscular appendage wrapped around my chest and pulled me up against the cold ceramic tiles. I bumped my head against the ceiling. It squeezed my chest, pressing the last screams out of me. Even in the dark of the bathroom, I felt the world grow darker. The voice came closer. You are fulfilling your purpose. You had stopped. A rough tongue, longer than my forearm, pressed against my face. I could feel my skin straining to stay on as little cuts formed on my forehead and scalp. A moment later, it dropped me like a bag of hammers. I came down hard, landing on my tailbone and bending my left wrist at a bad angle. Tired, hurt, and cold, with this thing looming over me. There was a short pause as it pondered what to do. Maybe it just liked to hear me suffer. You're rotten, it hissed. Bad wheat. What sort of soil have you grown in? I heard something whip back and forth. A crackle as ceramic tiles shattered, the bathroom mirror breaking, and the bathroom sink falling to pieces. Disgusting, it shrieked. Disgusting, disgusting wheat. The lights came back on. And for a split second, I saw it. An enormous, slithering creature. Like a transparent snake, full to the brim with twisted bodies and broken skulls. A cranium resembling 6 faces smooshed into a single head, like a parody of theatrical masks. Shimmering, razor-sharp scales, a stroke of which might cut me into pieces. Countless little appendages, elongated arms, sticking unceremoniously out of bald spots on its skin. It lunged, wanting to devour me whole, but it stopped itself. A warm breath touched my face as it realized I was inedible. It knew this, and yet it had a want. A need. Looking into 2 of its eyes, I saw only hatred. A hatred and a promise of terrible things to come. Then it was just gone, with the blink of an eye, leaving me broken and crying in the bathtub. I was lying there in a pool of black goo. The entire bathroom smelled like a chemical plant. There was another rumble in the pipes, as the sludge was washed away with warm, refreshing water. I just looked at the mess. The door, the mirror, the sink, half the apartment was in disarray. The thing had just appeared out of nowhere and disappeared just as fast. Maybe the sludge had protected me, in a way, but it felt like I'd just changed one awful thing for another. I was choking on the gut-wrenching smell. It wasn't long after midnight that I found myself leaning out of my kitchen window, gasping for air as the fireworks exploded overhead. Happy New Year. A few days passed before I met John Digman at the corner pub again. He'd ordered me a nacho plate and a beer, not even pretending to get something for himself. I sat down, wincing as my left wrist moved a bit too much. You look like shit, John smiled. What happened? You wouldn't believe me if I told you. I'm not so sure about that. I dunno, I said. I think I'm fucked. I'm done. You met something, didn't you? I just looked at him. He peered out from under his sunglasses as his eyes gave off a red sheen. There were little details about him that I hadn't seen. His hair, for instance, it wasn't just white, it had streaks of literal silver. Little cables, "You made it further than your dad ever did," he said. "But you got a long way to go if you're gonna make it to next year." The Yearwalker Part 2. Cleaning up that bathroom was almost as bad as whatever caused the mess in the first place. The smell was awful, and I had to pay a local carpenter to help me out with some of the messier stuff. The landlord was very understanding, but it was clear that fixing this was not up for debate. She might be nice, but she had no tolerance for destruction of property. I couldn't blame her. Luckily, Roy the carpenter gave me a fair price. But by far the toughest part to clean was the blue splotches left by the stinking goo that tumbled out of the shower head. It sort of burned into the ceramic, leaving small stains behind. It took a lot of sweat and baking soda to even reduce it to a light blue. The worst, by far, was the smell. No matter what I brought into the bathroom, it was all overshadowed by this awful chemical odor. It just didn't go away, and it burned my throat something awful. Little over a week into January, I met up with John again. I was feeling a bit weak, like a cold was coming on. I thought about staying home, but John insisted, and I got the feeling he wasn't the kind of person you should say no to. Arriving at the same old corner pub, I found John with a nacho plate and a beer. He wasn't even pretending to eat something this time. He tucked the stray hairs of silver behind his ear, as if to cover them up. "You all right there?" he asked. "Might be coming down with something," I sighed. "Don't tell me I didn't warn you." "You did," he nodded. "I usually don't catch stuff like that." "Haven't for years." "Oh yeah," I smiled. "How come?" "Company secrets," he said, tapping his forehead. He pushed the nacho plate to me and leaned in. There were a few other guests in the back, but I got the impression no one was listening. Maybe John was a regular. "I still don't get it," I said. "I don't understand what the hell that thing was." "I'm not sure what to call them," he said with a shrug, "but if you don't want to see more of them, you should stay out of Perch Pond." "Never heard of it." "All the better. Oh, and don't die." "Don't die?" "Yeah, don't die." I didn't even try to understand. I just stuffed my face with cheese and corn chips, hoping it'd magically cure me. It didn't, but I didn't mind trying. "I think what came out of the pipes was a fluke," said John. "Most of our water runs through a nearby reservoir, and they've been having some trouble. I think something dislodged and got into the system." "Nasty stuff," I said in between bites. "Not a fan. If you find more of it, save it. That stuff has tons of metals in it." "Metals? What kind of metals?" "The kind you can't blame for being there." "That makes no sense." I wiped my face and drank my beer. John just looked at me, hands crossed. "I'm asking you," he said. "If that stuff comes up again, save it. Take it to me. If you told me why, I might be more inclined to do so." "Do I need a reason for you to help me?" I hadn't been entirely serious, but John was nothing but. I could see the red of his eye poking out from his dark sunglasses. This wasn't him asking nicely. "Sure," I nodded. "Fine." "Thank you." He leaned back, looking over his shoulder. When he was sure no one was watching, he patted me on the shoulder and handed me an inch-thick wad of $100 bills. "Take a few days off," he said. "Get some cough syrup." That night I was struck with a fever. A nasty, sweat-through-the-night kind of murder fever. The kind of fever where you're too dehydrated to sleep and too tired to move. Where you get the shakes just from moving your hands, and it's too warm to stay under the covers. It was one of the worst fevers I'd ever had, and when I started to drift in and out of consciousness, I knew it was getting bad. I had to call in sick. There were a few angry voices at the other end, telling me I should have said something sooner. I was too tired to answer. I considered quitting there, and then, maybe I did. By that point, I hadn't decided what to do next. I'd signed up for this Yearwalk thing, but there was nothing stopping me from leaving town. I could go back home, try to patch things up, and maybe get a job at my stepdad's store. It wasn't a bad idea, but it felt like giving up. But standing there on my knees, worshipping the porcelain throne, I just wanted to be anywhere or do anything else. The next morning, after a few hours of falling in and out of sleep, I woke up to the feeling of something sticky on my face. Turns out, sometime during the night, I'd coughed up something bad. My pillow and part of the covers were stained with that same foul-smelling goo I'd touched in the shower about a week earlier. These thick black globs, leaving blue stains on my face, my hands, my chest, and all over my bed. It was a complete mess, and the smell was nauseating. I hurried to the bathroom, fetched a towel, and tried to scrub my face clean. It was like being sprayed with permanent ink. I could scrub and scrub for minutes, but nothing happened. And by God, my mouth tasted like death. I drowned myself with mouthwash, trying to burn away the taste. As I started to feel it dissipate, there was a sudden sound. A sharp, piercing noise, going straight from my ears and into my stomach. Who knew cell phones could be so loud? I reflexively swallowed, burning mouthwash straight down the gullet. The end result wasn't pretty. This is how I learned that everything in my stomach had turned to this black, rancid goo. It would come to me in waves. I could feel fine for about an hour, then it would just drain me. I'd cough up these black nuggets of goo over and over. The one saving grace was the taste slowly disappearing. Maybe I was just getting used to it. I couldn't eat. Everything I ate just turned into more goo, and my stomach filled up with it. I'd be so hungry that I couldn't think, and I still couldn't bring myself to eat a single bite. I pretty much lived in the bathroom, trying to work up the energy to call for help. Then again, I didn't have insurance. I stayed in the bathroom for the next 12 hours. When I finally managed to drink some water and take a shower, it was already dark outside. Finally having enough strength to move, I stumbled out looking for my phone. I had to call for help, but as I did, I had a quick look outside my window. There, on the other side of the street, was a dark shape. At the edge of the streetlight, it looked like a strange shadow. At first, I thought I was looking at it through a weird angle, my sleep-deprived brain riddled with misunderstandings. But after a few seconds, it dawned on me that this was a physical being, close to 11 feet tall and completely oil-slick black. I couldn't believe my eyes. I picked up my phone, stepped back, and looked for John's number. My fingers shook so much I put in the wrong code twice. I never turned my back on that window. The thing was tall enough to reach inside my goddamn bedroom. "You feeling better?" John's voice came through. "No," I screamed. "No, it's oh God. What's happening?" I started coughing. I tried to catch my breath. Something is, I'm not. Something is what? I walked around the room, trying to see the thing from a different angle. I couldn't see it. Maybe it was too dark. Maybe it had just been a long shadow to begin with. "Something is what?" he repeated. I think I'm seeing things. Are you in danger? Do you need something? I need help. I'm not feeling well. Listen to me. Is there an immediate physical threat to you right now? I looked outside. I tried to see something. I tried to make myself see something, but whatever had been there was gone. "No," I sighed. "No, I'm not. Then I'll come by in a couple of hours. I know what'll help. Not more nachos and, beer, right? Not until you're back on your feet." I fetched a blanket and curled up on the couch. I probably had to throw away my bed completely. As the blue stains sunk through the mattress, I realized there was no way I was getting rid of the smell. Then again, I had plenty of extra cash on hand, more than enough for a bed. What the hell did John do for a living anyway? As my stomach calmed, I drifted off to a restless sleep. That night, I dreamt. of a deep cave. A cave so dark and deep that you couldn't evolve ears that would outlast the pressure. Where bones would break and sinew froze, where jelly-like bodies bumped into one another in the blind dark. Senses developed over countless millennia to determine if the other bodies were friend, foe, or something else entirely. I felt my scales rubbing against the others. My kin, hundreds of friends and mates. Some danced around me, others disappeared in a heartbeat, a rush of water, pressure building up. Something large, teeth. I woke up with a gasp. A gelatinous sweat covered my body. It was so thick I could scrape it off with my fingernails. And covering the entire bedroom window was the largest oil-black hand I'd ever seen. It was trying to get the lock open. I jumped off the couch, almost slipping on my sweaty feet. "What the fuck?" I just screamed out reflexively. As I did, it retracted. It was fast and completely soundless, like bumping into a little fish in the dark of a nightmare. I decided I'd count the hours until John got there. I tried sending him a text, but my fingers were too slippery for the screen. I wasn't gonna turn my back on that window, so I just had to wait. I could do that. I could wait. I thought back on that thing I'd seen in the bathroom. That monstrous thing, calling me the little wheat. Maybe this was why it didn't eat me. Maybe whatever dropped out of that shower head was so awful that it made an otherworldly predator turn its back on me. And maybe this was the price I had to pay for surviving that night. Or maybe I was out of my fucking mind, ranting deliriously. A strange thing happens when you have such a violent fever. You lose perception of the passage of time. And to me, I had no idea how long I'd been sitting there, but the room felt darker. Could have been hours, could have been minutes. I had no way to tell. It was back. This time, it was standing tall enough to face me through the window. Just standing there, following me with its swiveling head. It felt like watching a silent rattlesnake. A creature coiled up and ready to strike, but with no visible warning sign as to when. It wanted something from me. I could feel it. I slowly stepped away from the couch, my legs struggling not to buckle. I got my phone and moved closer to the door, inch by inch, not letting my eyes wander. It followed me. It had a blank, eyeless face, but it followed me. I tried my hardest to make smooth, quiet motions. I barely breathed. My stomach was struggling from the weight of my movement, and my eyes had trouble focusing. And yet, I could clearly see it through the window. The long neck, the old-slick skin in perpetual movement as vague colors swirled across its surface. The vague outline of a skull buried somewhere deep. "Easy now," I whispered. "I'll just leave, all right." "I'll leave," the phone rang. I fumbled it out of my pocket. I answered the call, hearing John's voice for a brief second. "I'm about 5-6 minutes away. A hand pressed against the glass as a little circle started to take shape. It was coming in. The goddamn thing was coming in. It's here," I yelled. "It's breaking the window. Wah, what is it?" "What's going on?" The glass surrendered as a perfect circle was sucked away. A tendril reached in to click the hatch open, and the window flung open. I ducked and dodged to the side as an impossibly long arm reached for me. It didn't make a single sound. If I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't know it was even there. In the dark, it'd be invisible. Something grabbed my ankle. It squeezed so hard I thought my leg would break. An acid texture burned something into me, leaving my body feeling suddenly cold, then scorching hot. It pulled me backwards, making me fall flat on my stomach. Luckily, I was too slippery, and the hand lost its grip. I crawled forward, scrambling to get out the front door. As I reached it, I turned around. I realized the thing was gone. I knew it couldn't be this easy. Still in my socks, a t-shirt, and underwear, I got back on my feet. I listened. The thing didn't make a sound, but things it touched did, and I could hear the gutters creaking outside. It was moving to intercept. It was getting ahead of me. There was a metallic noise as something in the building rumbled. Barely remembering to breathe, I decided to hide. I got back in the bathroom and locked the door. It was all stained with blue spots. Even in the dark, I could feel the texture of where the spots were on the ceramic tiles. I held my breath and listened. Nothing. For a moment, I was safe. Then my stomach turned. It wasn't like the other times. This felt forced, like having something pulled out of me. I fell to my knees next to the toilet, and I felt something leaving my body, crawling out of my throat, wriggling and desperate to get away. I tried to scream, but it burned so bad I didn't know if I was even getting air into my lungs. When I finally heard myself pant and groan, I just gave up. There was no way for me to keep quiet. I heard rattling in the pipes, in the ventilation, in the drains, like an excited rodent rushing for a meal. It was coming for me. A nightmare erupted, hands coming out of every corner of the room, trying to pin me to the ground. Elongated limbs tying my feet together. All of it causing that sensation of a chemical singing my flesh with plastic ice burn. I reached for the door handle, slowly feeling myself being pulled towards the back wall. My hand slipped off the handle, over and over. "No," I cried. "No, no, no," that little fish in the dark, bumping into friends, foe, and others. And ahead of me, I knew there was nothing but teeth and death. The bathroom door flung wide open. In the blink of an eye, I saw the bulbous head of the creature, pulled back to reveal a massive skull the size of my torso. A cranium covered in void black veins, pulsating with excitement. John Digman grabbed my arm and pulled, hard. I thought he'd pull my arm straight out of the socket. Maybe the surprise of it all had the creature staggered as it let go. It retreated, hundreds of little tendrils getting sucked back into the pipes. Fucking hell, John spat. When the fuck did he get out of his fucking washing machine? I leaned on him as he hurried to get me outside. I could see black goo running down my chest. I must have thrown up more than I thought. That's it, John said. You're staying with me, enough of this. He helped me down the stairs, where I could see my landlord smoking in the hallway. John walked straight past her. No time, Lee, he said, and keep your fucking brother away. You're paying for the repairs, she smiled. And you can fuck right off to your brother's shed. You're welcome to join us. John kicked the front door open, and there it was, 11 feet tall, rippling with pent-up strength. Like ripples in a river, the shakes were so violent I could hear the vibrations. Peeking out of corners of its visage, I could spot parts of a giant skeleton hiding in the dark. Jesus cry. Hold on. John dropped me like a sack of potatoes and rushed back inside. The creature immediately reached for me. It didn't bother staying quiet anymore, and it didn't care if I knew. The viper was striking. I pushed myself back against the wall, shielding myself, screaming my throat raw, but nothing came of it. A little flick in the dark, as John held up my landlord's lighter. For a brief second, the creature just looked at us, repelled by the flame. Just go back to sleep, Hank, John called out. Or go back to the quarry. I don't fucking know what you do, but unless you want to become a walking fucking tire fire, you better fuck right off. It circled us. A single step taking it a car's length in either direction. It stared intently at us. Glimpses of a death's head moving in and out of the void. You got plenty of it up in the apartment, John said. Take it, leave us the fuck alone. Whatever bargain he struck must have worked. Moments later, it melted into the dark of the night and disappeared. John pushed me into his car. My mind was racing, and I just looked around me. I could imagine shapes in the dark, like it was still out there. I tried to focus on a single thing to calm my heart, but nothing seemed to work. My stomach still turned over and over like a washing machine. Just stay awake, he said. I think I know what you got, and I know what to do. Wow, what the fuck was that? Right, he said. Right. Hank, yeah, we ought to talk about that. I focused on him. I bobbed my head back and forth, trying to keep my eyes from rolling back. John stepped on the gas. The little streaks of silver in his hair were solid metal, with little copper endings. They really were cables. Why you got, and I passed out. I have a vague memory of waking up every now and then. I remember being carried. I remember pain, pieces of tape, a beeping sound. I remember a bucket and John beating a machine to life. And as the sun rose, I woke up in a bed. John had to pump my stomach and put me on a round of dialysis. When I woke up, I thought that whole thing had been a nightmare. The sun was so warm, shining on my face, and the sheets were so soft, like no one had ever slept in that bed. John checked my temperature, took a blood sample, and had me swallow a handful of vitamins. He still wore his sunglasses. I just did what he said. I was so happy not to have my stomach turn that I didn't mind. I was already hankering for a sandwich, maybe some orange juice. It's a sort of buildup, John said bluntly. That shit stays in your system for a long time. I can get it out, but you'll need regular checkups. What is it? He sat down on the edge of the bed, patting my bandaged leg. Most of me was bandaged from where the creature had burned me. It's a sort of bacteria, he said. It's sort of hard to explain. Try me. Imagine there, little pockets. Back when the world was still shaping itself, these little pockets of water, deep beneath the sea, sealed shut. Like bubbles, some were small, some were big, some were entire cave systems. All right. John got back up and looked out the window. For a moment, I feared a hand would appear, but nothing happened. Now imagine life evolves there, he continued. Isolated and independent from everything else. Life that needs the nutrients and minerals contained in that ecosystem. Sure, like deep-sea creatures. Now imagine all they have in the way of nutrients is this. Metal, a sort of fungus, and each other. That sensation I had in my dream, the crushing darkness, teeth. Now imagine these pockets bursting. Little things exploding into a new environment, not knowing how to react. Sounds like Jurassic Park. Exactly like that. He sat down on the floor next to me, leaning against the wall. I could see the edges of his eyes under the sunglasses. He looked so tired, like he hadn't slept for days, and yet he didn't blink. There are just a handful of them, he continued. There's one outside the coast of New England, one in the Baltic Sea. I think there's one near the Bering Strait. They found one in Vietnam not too long ago. And these things come from there. Sort of, yeah, they're not really just one thing. John got back up and stretched. He adjusted his sunglasses, snapped his fingers, and headed for the door. I'll get you breakfast. You'll be staying with me from now on. Wait. He stopped by the door, looking back on me. What does all of this have to do with me? I don't. We're nowhere near New England. John nodded. Right, yeah, he said. There's that. He took a deep breath and put on a brave face. The largest pocket in the world is right here in Tomskog, Minnesota. He smiled. And it stretches for miles all the way up to Frog Lake. And that's all for tonight. Yearwalker will continue next Monday, so if you're enjoying the story, remember to like, subscribe, and stay tuned. Until next time, rest well, and don't wander too far.